to the third working group webinar on GeoDCAT-AP. I welcome you. Unfortunately, Pavlina got ill, so I'll take the short honor to welcome you to this webinar. On the agenda today, we will have a number of GeoDCAT-AP issues, as expected. We have some more generic aspects on code list, which is cross-profile as well, so but relevant in our context. And then after the break, we have a different set of speakers. Namely, we invited a number of national member states to express their experience on INSPIRE and mapping to GeoDCAT-AP and what comes along with that. And then we can exchange information with that. And yeah, Annie, already thanks for the short notice and the help on this to all the presenters. So as usual, please mute yourself. If you have any questions, raise hands and use the chat. And as well, we ask for your permission to record this webinar so that we can share it later. So then I give the floor to Jakub for the first part.
Good morning, everyone. Let me start with a quick reminder about the ecosystem in which we are doing the revision of GeoDCAT-AP. So GeoDCAT-AP is primarily a DCAT-AP profile for geospatial datasets. When DCAT-AP is a profile of the W3C DCAT, but that's not the only input for GeoDCAT-AP. On the other side, we have the ISO standards and the INSPIRE Directive, which also are inputs for GeoDCAT-AP. And recently, also there is this OGC GeoDCAT activity, which aims to create a geospatial profile of DCAT, which is independent of European specifics that are reflected in GeoDCAT-AP. And we have a quick status update on how this activity is going. So, Bert, could you please share with us what you have learned?
Okay, so it was at the end of March. So if we look to the, there was a SWIC, as I call it, a working group on it, and the presentation. We did a presentation on the status on GeoDCAT-AP, where we are and our activities. But if we look to the GeoDCAT in terms of presentation of a content, what is the profile up there, that was limited progress. So this is still ongoing, and they invited, if you have time and interest, for additional hands to give this a shape. So this is important that additional hands are welcome. As well, the SWIC core team considers to organize hands-on workshops later, maybe in the autumn, but it was not very clear yet on which moments and when to have it will happen to shape better the GeoDCAT profile. So this is a plan that is arising on there. And then additionally, we discussed later on the improved continued collaboration between the working group on OGC level and CEMIC and GRC at the European level. So this is in short. So there's still work on the head. We are in touch with each other, but at this moment there's little to progress content-wise that impacts our current GeoDCAT-AP activity. As a short input, just as a short note, maybe of the confusion of the name giving, GeoDCAT we consider for OGC, and GeoDCAT-AP is for the European level, in similar as DCAT-AP.
Thanks, Bert. So now let's have a look at where we are at with the GeoDCAT-AP 3 revision plan. We have already had 2 working group webinars. Today we have the 3rd one, and there is one more planned for the 14th of May. As to the agenda, today we'll tackle some specific geospatial issues. And we have the guest speakers on national experience with implementing GeoDCAT-AP. And for the next webinar, we'll finish with the remaining issues. We'll tackle HVD, and we'll have a look at some of the related tools, such as the XSLT style sheet. Now, with the GeoDCAT-AP issues, the status we are at is that currently in GitHub, we have 57 issues, out of which 25 are already resolved. 3 are to be discussed today, 3 are to be re-discussed today because they were postponed from the last webinar. 6 are already scheduled for May. Then we have received recently 5 issues reporting on implementation experience from Flanders. So thank you for that. And then we have 14 minor issues, editorial, DCAT-AP 3 alignment, INSPIRE alignment. But then I would like to draw your attention to the 6 issues marked as feedback requested. Here, we really depend on the feedback from you, the community, and unless we get any feedback on those issues, we'll be forced to close those with no resolution. As to the issue types in the repository that we have, there are basically 2 types of issues. They are marked with the webinar and the date labels. And if there is nothing, none of the green labels applied, then it means that that issue will be discussed with slides and voting in that webinar. But then there is a set of minor issues that are, well, too minor to to have a dedicated space in the webinar, and those are marked with resolution proposed. So there is a resolution proposed in the GitHub issue, and unless there is negative feedback or a bigger discussion happening with those will be automatically accepted. Those propositions in those issues will be automatically accepted, and then the status changes from resolution proposed to resolution provided. And when that issue is actually reflected in a draft of the specification, the status is changed to fixed. Those issues are basically closed, but technically we'll close the issues after we release the revised version of the specification. So for today, we have a couple of issues targeting specific geospatial aspects. And the first one is not an issue with a proposal. It is more of an open question, and it has to do with the spatial resolution. More specifically, its specification on the different levels that we have in DCAT. So you can have a spatial resolution specified on the level of a data set, a distribution, and a data service. And now the question is, and this may cause a little bit confusion, what happens or what is the relation of the individual spatial resolution specifications when they are specified on multiple levels? So for instance, can a distribution have a different spatial resolution than the data set it is part of? If no, then the question is whether we actually need the specification on both levels. If yes, then is there any specific relation? Should all distributions of a data set have the same spatial resolution as the data set? Or should the data set be somehow a union of all the different spatial resolutions found in the distributions? And then this question can be also extended to the data service. So do all the data sets served by a data service have the same spatial resolution as the data service, or should the data service have a union of the spatial resolutions of the individual data sets? So those are the different questions that we have, and we would like to reach or get some sort of clarity into what is your experience with the specification of spatial resolutions on these different levels, and whether we really need to specify that on different levels or not, and what are the relations here. So this is more of an open question. So we welcome any comments that you might have on these questions. based on your experience or an opinion. And you can use both the chat, or you can raise a hand and voice your opinion. So far, I can see no raised hands.
Okay, so Geraldine says that in ISO, the resolution is included in the datasets. When mapping to the GeoDCAT, it will be GeoDCAT-AP, it will be the same. Yes, that of course we will try to map. We will try to understand where it sits, but it's good to know. And what Jesper says he has experience with different spatial resolutions at distribution levels. But he is in favor of
tagging the data set by all the different spatial resolutions found in the distributions.
Yeah. So that this is the kind of the approach or the expectation to happen. Any other feedback of experiences? I see the chat is getting warm. So some cases. So Jordi mentions complex cases could exist. So this mixing could exist.
And Matthias suggests to just mark the most specific spatial resolution on the dataset level of all the resolutions found on the distribution as an alternative.
Yeah. That means, of course, intelligence. You have to calculate and to know. And so that means that we must ensure that we understand machine-wise what is written there. Okay.
I have a comment, maybe.
Yes.
So right now we allow distributions to correspond to different formats or languages if you have language in the distribution, in the data. But they are considered to be equivalent in some sense.
Yes.
They should not be complementary. Two distributions should not be complementary. It is unclear for me whether different resolutions should therefore be considered also to be the same dataset or two different datasets. I think it is something that should be stated clearly somewhere. I think it is on the limit of what should be accepted when you think of it from a perspective of content negotiation for getting a resource, that you get different resolutions. It's really on the verge of something that should perhaps not be the same dataset. Yeah, so I'm very unsure about this. That's what I'm trying to say. It is, on the other hand, something you could think of, that it could be another way of using a dataset series, which is upcoming in DCAT-3, to indicate that this is a kind of another dimension to use for a series. But it's more complicated, and compatibility-wise with INSPIRE, it probably would be more complicated.
Okay. I see that Stefan and Anja follow the reasoning of Matthias, what just expressed. So that they consider this as a distinguishing aspect of the distributions versus a data set, so that you get a distinguished element into it.
And then there is an opinion by Elena that there may be many resolutions specified for one data set.
And there's, of course, here the spatial resolution. Maybe that's a subtlety that we don't capture in this one, is where it is being officially registered, saying it's maintained, the data set is maintained at this resolution, and the others are kind of derived. So you can calculate another resolution from each other. So, of course, how you deal with then with derived information. And then Paloma mentions that maybe there is even an intrinsic combination of the two in the data. I'm not a geospatial expert on that, but I don't know how that works, but it seems that this is possible. Okay.
Jesper says that in DCAT-3, spatial resolution is defined as a minimum spatial resolution resolvable in a data set, which would support to have multiple spatial resolutions for different distributions, but indicate the minimum one in the data set. And Jody supports also 1.2.2, which is to tag a data set with all the different spatial resolutions found in the distributions.
Okay.
Matthias, you have your hand risen still?
Yeah. I have the feeling that the practice, if we just look to the practice, that probably the parallel with different resolutions is the one that is currently into the practice happening to capture every case, but that there is still, let's say, a need to drive to a guideline to be a bit more precise and to be have it, as Matthias mentioned, this understanding that this is somehow, that's what I deduct from the chat.
Yeah, so there were multiple opinions that favored 1.2.2. So a data set being tagged with all the different spatial resolutions that are found in its distributions. And then there is the second opinion that when we have two different spatial distributions, then we are actually talking about two different data sets.
Yeah. Okay. So the spatial element has multiple in INSPIRE. So Fabio shares us the INSPIRE view that there's multiple ones. And okay. The resolution could be defined as the default resolution for the resolution. You can override it. Okay.
So could we just leave it open and say that if you provide several, it should correspond to the levels you have on the distributions. If you choose to provide only one, then it should be the highest resolution that you have in one of the distributions.
So that's a possibility, but still we need to formulate that in a usage note so that it's clear that this is what we mean in the specification. So I suggest that for the next webinar we prepare the usage note and we'll vote on that one next time.
And you can already share if you have other points to share in the GitHub issue on 100. So there's a place where this discussion can continue. Thank you for your feedback. It's good to see we have a lot of feedback.
Yeah. So moving on to the next issue. Here we have kind of a similar problem, but a bit different. Here we are talking about multiple values of spatial coverage on a data set. So for a data set, we may have multiple values of spatial coverage. And again, it is a little bit unclear what this should mean. On the left-hand side, we have a simpler example where we have basically 3 IRIs as 3 values of a spatial coverage of a single data set. We have Belgium, a country, and then we have Brussels and Antwerp, so 2 cities. So the question is, what does this mean? What is the spatial coverage? And a little bit more complex example on the right-hand side is where we mix in the different ways of actually expressing the spatial coverage. So we have the case of an IRI, then we have a case of a blank node linked to an IRI using DCT identifier. Then we have a blank node with just a pref label, so a label of the thing, but with no identifier. And then we have a bounding box described as a polygon in GeoJSON. So if this case happens, again, the question is, what does this mean? Are those alternative representations of the same thing, or should they be treated as a spatial union? What is the expectation of both the publishers and the consumers that see this metadata? And here we have a proposition to say in a usage note that when multiple values are used for spatial coverage, this may be interpreted as a spatial union or as an alternative representations of spatial coverage that might fit with no explicit spatial relation. So this still allows for both interpretations, both as a union and as alternatives, but at least this usage note makes it explicit that those are the 2 cases that can be expected when multiple representations of spatial coverage are found on a single data set. So here we actually would like to hear your opinion, whether you agree with the proposition or not. So before we get to voting, are there any opinions about this issue?
Maybe you can switch back to the example, Jacob, just to...
Yep.
Then you can see the example. So if it would be the union, then in the left-hand case, then it would be sufficient to have Belgium. There is no need to specify the cities over there. If it's kind of alternatives, then it's a little bit, it can be useful to have some other names of other places in available to make it more precise. That's probably mostly on the right-hand side case where you have the bounding box together with a URI.
Matthias says that he thinks there are only 2 cases in DCAT-AP, URI and bounding box explicitly.
There are recommendations into it. So if you only follow the recommendations and you exclude all the other options, then yes, that's all this is valid.
And Geraldine says that in ISO, spatial coverage is defined always as a bounding box.
We see that Jesper is considering this as one entity. His expectation was that it was actually one entity with different representations of the same entity, if I'm correct. reading it. And Anya adds that geographical area, so the bounding box polygon is always there. And there might be identifiers like in the right-hand side example, Belgium and a bounding box.
And Stepan says that there can be multiple bounding boxes and bounding polygons in ISO. And Matthias says that if multiple bounding boxes are provided, they should be treated as a union.
Is that as well the case in INSPIRE, the community as a whole? If you provide 2 bounding boxes to your INSPIRE data sets, I don't know if it's possible, but if it would be the case, would you consider that then as a union always or not?
I can imagine. I can imagine that in DCAT it can be treated as union, and in ISO also description, geography description is available, so it can be mapped to some RDF presentation to some ontology, etc. My opinion is to have both representations in DCAT, bounding boxes as well the other representations which are here presented.
Thank you, Stefan. It's indeed, just to clarify the issue, we are not discussing the representation of the spatial coverage itself. So all the possible cases you see on the right-hand side will be still valid. That is not the case. It's more about if you have multiple lines of the property, what does that mean? That's where the usage node we try to resolve. So bounding boxes, URIs, anonymous nodes with labels, we will not have the intention with this issue to change anything on that. So we see that multiple values will be anyhow presented. That's clear the case. That's I think from the reactions that we get, Jakob.
Yeah.
It's not yet unclear for me if they have to be interpreted always as a spatial union. I don't see that coming out of the reactions. That is the interpretation.
Actually, we have some reactions that those may be alternative representations of the same spatial coverage. So this leads us to our proposition. So we propose to at least make these 2 options that exist in the community explicit in the usage node. So if we could get your votes, +1s or -1s, to include this usage node, that when multiple values are present, it may be interpreted both as a spatial union or as alternative representations of the same coverage.
So you can add +1s and minus. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, I see only +1 so far. Okay, all +1s. So This means that the proposition is accepted. Thank you for voting. And we have one similar issue with multiple values of spatial coverage, but this time it is in the case of a data service. So we have a data service serving multiple data sets. So what should the spatial coverage of such a data service be? And our proposition is to say that if a data service provides access to multiple data sets, then the spatial coverage of that data service will be treated as the union of the spatial coverages of these data sets. So we may have individual spatial coverages on individual data sets, but then the data service will have the union of those marked on it. So again, if we could get +1s if you agree, -1s if you do not agree. Yes, this means when it is expressed specifically, explicitly on the data service, how should we treat this? And we are saying we should treat this as a union of those data sets, their spatial coverages. So again, I see only +1s, so thank you for voting. We'll accept this proposition. And now these were the geospecific issues. And now we have information on a strategy that GeoDCAT-AP actually takes. And I will ask Bert to take this.
Yeah, okay. So let's start. So what we want to do first is a bit of a higher bird's eye view on if we create a data specification, a profile, then we have a number of use cases, a use case at hand, and then we have to choose how we're going to implement that use case. And here, as a specification creator, we have two options always at hand that we can do. Either we can use an abstraction approach, we aggregate, we condense information into one property, or we are very precise and we find the right property that explicitly perfectly matches the use case. So these are the two strategies that we have at hand. And you can see that, for instance, you can have multiple code lists, values from different code lists for the same subject. That is an aggregation strategy. You could do this, say, okay, well, this doesn't fit our use case. We want to be more precise because we want to have a unique label for this. In this case of we use this code list, we have some particular constraints on usage on that. We want to have a unique property, but still be related to this more abstract layer, and then we can use, for instance, subproperties. So these are the two implementation strategies that we have at hand. And there are some pros and cons on each of them. So on the aggregation and abstraction level, yeah, the most prominent, let's say, positive side on it, it's a single property to implement. And it's one property, it makes the specification simpler, more condensed. However, since it caters for a more abstract usage, the label and the definitions will be more abstract. And as you add more constraints, or if you want to have more, let's say, usage constraints, cardinality constraints will be quite open, but in additional constraints like code lists and so on, become a bit more difficult. So you will start to write a longer usage note on how to use this property in order to express the additional constraints, not in a formal way, but in the reading in the usage note way. That's the way that you have at hand. If you do it more precisely, then you can do a bit more formal. So that means that for each case as a negative side, you start creating a specific property. But you can then attach very formally labels and definitions to it. You can attach very unique cardinality constraints and code list constraints to each of the properties. And that means that at a certain point in time, you even can automate more easily on that level. But they are choices and they are equivalent in the choice. We always have to make this choice. It's just to say it's not a preference on one or the other. this is always at hand. On the next slide, if we then look to the usage of these things and we want to create a portal and want to share this to the public, then there is a natural representation that you can have for each of them. If you want to have in mind that you have a data set with the individual cases that you had in my use cases nicely listed, that's the right-hand side, then you see that it very naturally matches with this precise one. So you have one-to-one to the data and the representation. And the same holds for the left-hand side, where you have an aggregation view and you match it on the view, and this is the view that you want to share. It's one-to-one, it's easily to do. Nothing is special. However, if you want to cross the boundaries from one data representation to the other representation, then it's a bit of challenging. You will see that from the precise to the aggregation, provided we have these nice relationships like these subproperty statements, the mapping is rather easy. You can organize, you can technically do this in a relative simple way. If you go from the abstraction to the precise representation, then a lot of discussion will happen. And then the UI designer will come and say, I don't know how I have to distinguish code list A from code list B, and these values, I have to do this, what is the labels, etc., and so on. So you start to create this precise representation in the UI, but not in the data, and you have to somehow to map it. So this is a challenging effort. So again, if you are aware of it, it's fine. Just to illustrate that this automation is rather simple, if you have your catalog in RDF and we have these subproperty statements, then you could do some even textual change, replace everything, and you get the abstract layer. So it is, in that case, rather simple. Just to illustrate, this is doable. On the next slide. So now, taking the hat of GeoDCAT-AP in the future, in the relationship with what we want to have it with the INSPIRE metadata. There are two strategies that we can have for GeoDCAT-AP in relationship with INSPIRE metadata. Either we see it as a fully derivation. We say we somehow map it. So as we have done and we expressed in the next webinar on the XSLT, we do all this kind of mapping. And then in the mapping exercise, in the mapping doing, it is fine to aggregate and condense information that is in the INSPIRE very detailed expressed, but more abstract and more generic, aggregated in GeoDCAT-AP. That's fine in that. But in that case, it becomes almost impossible or very difficult to do the inverse from the aggregation back to the original INSPIRE metadata. Then you have to put a lot of additional information into the XSLT, in the transformations or the tooling to do this inverse mapping. If we take the other strategy and we say, okay, in the future, somehow, maybe we want to use GeoDCAT-AP natively for the INSPIRE metadata, then the current setting, we want to maintain all this metadata, the same information, exactly in the same detail as in INSPIRE is available, then we have to be more precise. And then we try to go towards a GeoDCAT-AP, which more inclined to have a two-way conversion from ISO INSPIRE to GeoDCAT-AP and from GeoDCAT-AP to ISO INSPIRE. That will somehow make this relation more strict. So having set these two strategic decisions, having that in mind, and the use case implementation, then you see that there somehow is connection to the two. If we take strategic approach one, where it is a derivation, GeoDCAT-AP is seen as a derivation from the INSPIRE metadata, then we can really find the abstraction implementation strategy. If in the future we see that we want to use GeoDCAT-AP natively, not now, but if you want, if this intense, then you are more inclined to have this precise implementation strategy, because then you have the natural mapping to it. It is not our recommendation to build our profile GeoDCAT-AP on the two strategies combined in a mixed way. it makes it more difficult to explain on why choices in properties are made. If you say in this case we do it that, in that case we do it that, then it's a bit of challenging. So we would like to have a single strategy to be applied in GeoDCAT-AP so that we can have a clear explanation on it. If we then look to the future, strategic approach 1, if we choose for that one, and we want ever to go to a full, let's say, use GeoDCAT-AP as a native representation for the INSPIRE metadata, then there will be a major rewrite of GeoDCAT-AP necessary. Then your tools or whatever that you had built for GeoDCAT-AP will influence and will be having at that point in time a major rewrite. So we have to have this potential impact in mind. If we choose for 2, the shift to 1 ever, if we say, okay, we want to have a more condensed metadata in the future, then it can be still automated, and actually it can be a small layer on top of it. So we discussed among this, and we see that actually strategic approach 2, if we apply that with the precise implementation, if we want to enable that, will allow us to resolve a lot of potential future issues with a minor impact at the moment. So it's a minor impact on the specification, namely on a few properties that we have postponed, and they're on the next slides, to make them use the precise implementation strategy. And then we actually keep our hands open for the future. There's nothing to decide whether or not this GeoDCAT-AP will be used as or allowed as a native implementation, but it makes it an enabler. So this is that's what we have at hand.
Thank you, Bert. There is a bit of a feedback in the chat. So Geraldine says that if we take strategy 2, we have to take into account the whole ISO standard, not just the INSPIRE, to foresee niche richness in GeoDCAT. And then there are supporting votes to Geraldine. And Matthias says that it can be challenging, but it is still possible actually to build a UI on top when we have strategy 1. It's not impossible. And then in Flanders, it seems that strategy 1 is implemented.
Yep. Just to make sure in the strategic, can you go back to the strategic slide, the previous slide? Strategy 1 and strategy 2 is, at least strategy 2 is not the intention of our working group today. It is just keeping that in mind, and it's not the intention to be fully covering ever. At the moment, it is just enabling. If this decision is taken, then nothing has to be changed to the current GeoDCAT-AP. We don't have to do a major change in the existing properties. If there's a lot of more metadata in INSPIRE that is not covered by GeoDCAT-AP. And if we have to do a full native, and we have to discuss on all of these elements. But that's not the case. We only want to make a future outlook with this, so that if it would be the discussion coming, we have a stable version where we can work upon.
Yeah. Then Ines says that it would be good to take a step back and see what is the purpose of DCAT-AP and GeoDCAT. I assume GeoDCAT-AP here. And that's exactly what we are discussing here, right? So the purpose of GeoDCAT-AP is not only to provide a mapping from INSPIRE metadata to DCAT-AP, which would correspond to strategy 1, but it seems that maybe in the future we don't want to block the way of easily going both ways. which is more what strategy 2 is going for.
So it's like, as Jesper mentioned, we want to enable the possibility for the future with strategy 2 to implement. If we decide for strategy 1, it means as an impact assessment says, then if the community would plan to use GeoDCAT-AP natively, then there will be a major rewrite. So
Paloma says that she thinks strategy 2 is the most complete. Matthias says that it is possible to do a two-way conversion with strategy 1.
Yeah, Geraldine, indeed, it's correct. So we are not, if we would do the GeoDCAT-AP to ISO INSPIRE, we did the two-way back, then there will be a lot of extra discussions. So this is really agreed. That is not, we are aware of that. Yeah. But that's, the goal is more to cater for the future. So to enable us to make decisions on the issues and to have a specification which is possible future-proof. We have a limited effort now. So this is the efforts that we want to take now to make it in the future. Yes, Matthias?
So when I did the implementation, my problem was not with this, the conversion in two directions. I had issues with format not being expressed on the distribution level of a data set, but rather higher up in the XML structure, for instance. That was much harder problem to solve with custom embeddings in values. So I just want to emphasize that it is possible to check the URI patterns to distinguish between different SCOS concepts and know which category it belongs to, for instance.
Yeah, but then you are doing value inspection. So that's what you say.
Yes, but you can do that generically in an application profile configuration, so you don't have to. Yeah, I think you can automate this both from a conversion perspective as well from editing and presentation perspective.
My feeling is that it's not so as trivial, or at least the specification and in that case, the specification of the data will be slightly different than as going to the implementation of the precise versus the abstract. You have to do this red arrow, which is yeah, everyone has to implement it himself.
But in Shackle, for instance, you can provide regular expressions to distinguish between the same use of property but different values. And yeah, I guess that can be used as a starting point for doing the conversions. And to be fair, the existing XSLT transform does a lot of complicated things, and sometimes it breaks. So I think you probably need something more complicated anyway than what we have now.
I see, Ina, that strategy 2 is difficult for all. Ina, what is your concern? Because I don't get it exactly. Yeah, for all metadata, if you want to cover it all, And so are you afraid that?
I will give some explanation. Where I'm afraid for is that we have a domain, we have code list for, specific for the INSPIRE. I think there are 3 or 4 required, but we have also code list for the mobility domain. We have also code list for the environmental domain. We have also code list for other domains. So, and it's all about geospatial data. If we want to be very specific, what is strategy 2, then it's needed to make specific properties for themes for all these different domains. And we are not always aware of all those different code lists they are using. So for a national portal, it's really difficult to make this possible because in ISO they can use their own code list and thesaurus in keywords. So then we need beforehand know which thesaurus they are using, and in national portal then we must make a theme what is where this domain can choose a value from their thesaurus or code list. So that's my worries. If you look very specific, if you only look at HVD, I understand you want to create a specific HVD theme, but it's not possible from a national perspective to do this for all different domains.
Okay, so I think here there's a concern, but I think this is just inherent of the multiple domains. So if you go back, Jakob, to the first slide, and here on the strategies, implementation strategy, if the use case is I, as a profile, as a domain, want to express values from a code list, I want to have somewhere keywords from a code list, then you have these 2 options available, and they will not change in efforts of choosing and to maintain the code list and to associate it in the data in the abstraction or the precise. It's the same efforts in the end. You have to allow the publisher to select the code list value, and as a consumer portal viewer, you have to be able to consume both. So this is just inherent on the multi-domain situation. So that will not change whether or not it is properties, sub-properties, or aggregation. It will be not being changing, because if you don't know the value and you get the value, what do you do with it? That's your concern. Yes, this is allowed. In both cases, it will happen. Either it is with a specific property and you could say, I ignore specific properties. Either it is a value in a property that you know, and then you have to decide, I filter out this value. It's equivalent efforts. So just to state that the amount of requirements is not the issue at hand, in the sense of that's just intrinsic to our multi-domain requirements. So the best way to resolve that is to have in all legislations there will be only one theme and one keyword code list, and then it's the simplest. But that will not be the case, huh? That we know.
Bart, if I may, but I'm thinking from a national perspective, where all ISO metadata is in one national portal. So there is ISO metadata from different domains in one national portal, and we want to transform it to the open data portal in DCAT. So we have to make the mapping from a national portal where a lot of different domains have published their metadata. So and that's the problem. And then it's not possible to make properties for all different things, because there are a lot of different domains in one catalog. If you start from one domain, then it's possible, but that is not our starting point. And also, if you look to regional government provinces, then there is also metadata from different domains in a catalog. So a lot of metadata is published, not domain specific, but just more organized on national, regional, local level, and not organized in different domains.
I think what Matthias just raised in short, yeah, is that what you want to say, Matthias? Yeah.
Yes, and also that the data portal Sweden envisioned that we can upload terminologies to them. So we expand what the data portal has access to with more and more terminologies over time. And you don't have to do any development of the data portal if you have a few of these properties that just have a range of concepts. You just upload another terminology when you see that someone has provided some other categorization scheme, and it would work, even with facets and stuff. That's the aim.
Yeah. Okay. But that's by design that you say this is an open list and allow multiple extensions on this one.
Yes, but you can also restrict certain fields to say this is a specific range of concepts. So, but we probably also will have one which is unrestricted, and then, okay, we have a generic categorization which will be able to present whatever concept you have decided to categorize it under.
Okay, so what I see here is that on one hand, there is the current approach where, and that's what Matthias in last chat says, it's a generic keyword, and then at the end, if you do the data sharing, you don't know anymore where the value comes from. So it's at that point in time, if you receive the INSPIRE metadata, if we would read it, then we don't know anymore whether there was for this topic at least one value expected or not. It is just like that. The problem is that if we want to have these unique cardinalities upon, they move into these usage notes descriptions. And then it is a specific handwritten shackle. You have to interpret it yourself.
So, can I add something?
Yeah.
I think it's not really about the code lists and not about different domains. That's all slipstream of it, but it's really speaking up. What should we do with GeoDCAT? Is it really a replacement then of the ISO INSPIRE standards? Because if we make it also available that natively the geo data and the geo services will be possible to describe over there, we have to keep in mind the once only principle. And that is really what we did with GeoDCAT. We started from ISO INSPIRE and we mapped it so that it was available in the DCAT world as well, but once only, and so in one direction at this point in time. And we started with GeoDCAT in that sense. It was needed so that INSPIRE minimal and maybe a bit more of ISO would be also be available in RDF. If we say, okay, we let it, we make it available that an editor can describe natively in GeoDCAT, the other way around will be much more complex to fill out than the ISO standards, because semantics are really different. One example, the contact lists. Yeah, there are 7 or 8 maybe contact roles in ISO, and we have a lot less in GeoDCAT and DCAT. So what will we do then? Will we foresee then more usage nodes so that the correct semantically described roles of the native DCAT world would be in the ISO available? Another example, lineage is not that provided yet. In DCAT-AP there is a bit coming up, but not at all, or the same for quality, not at all that rich like it is in the ISO. So yeah, I know ISO is very complex, and GeoDCAT is a solution in less complexity and a bit more being lean and clean. But we lose a lot, and it's not, whilst we have discussed already, this is a good GeoDCAT mapping from ISO to INSPIRE, that the other way around is even clearer, even easily. So we really have to speak out then what should be there more or other than in the GeoDCAT world, because it's also the bi-directionary thing. And will we then say, okay, we lose ISO fully and everybody has to note in GeoDCAT then? Or will we have more usage nodes and more strict and formal descriptions how you have to use GeoDCAT and natively, so that it could be the bi-directionally? So that's really the case. It's not about a code list and subproperties of subject, then etc. That's a small thing, and even if you do the first or second strategy, you can have both options. So that it's really not the thing to talk about, but really the ones only. And what is the purpose and the goal then? Eh?
Yeah, well, okay, there I don't have an answer, Geraldine, on that level.
Me neither.
So that's the reason. It's a bit of to have a reading of the specification, to make our specification in a way, let's say, modeled from a certain perspective. That is the objective objective of the target of this discussion, to know that you know how it is being designed, and then we a little bit have the impact assessment on it. So if we choose for the, I'm fine for choosing either of these. It's not a problem with it, but it is clear that we have to make the impact is important. For instance, in the current, if we apply the current aggregation strategy, that means that we will use DCT subjects, a topic of a resource, and 1 to n in GeoDCAT-AP. That will be the spec for it, and you can place whatever into it, and there will be somewhere usage nodes for all the topics and keywords that are in INSPIRE to be mapped to that. That is it. That's what the spec will contain. It's not like it's now somehow doing the second one, but behind the scenes it's the left one. So it combines a visual representation of the right-hand side with an implementation in the left-hand side. And that's a very confusing situation. So you don't know which strategy has been used or what was the intention in GeoDCAT-AP in the spec. And that's why it's so good that we discuss this. So I feel that there's still a afraidness of, I should be able to create these sub-properties. That's what INE expresses. And that she has to do the detection mechanism, as Matthias mentioned, in order to generate that. So that is the feeling. On the other hand, the semantics will be cleaner will be more corresponding to the current visualization if we use the precise.
Yeah, I'm not against the precise one. We implement it like that, for example, but it's about the second one. Ali, you are mixing up now two things. Eh? This discussion about how we should do code lists. That's one thing. And it's nothing to do with the strategy 1 and 2 that you brought after that.
Okay, yeah.
In the bidirectionally way. Eh? So my concern was about the second topic where you said, okay, should we still use strategy 1 to map the ISO INSPIRE to GeoDCAT, or should we do 2 that it is the vice versa as well, that you can use GeoDCAT as a native one? And so my comment was on that topic. And that has nothing to do with this practice on the slide yet, because even in both strategies, that is in your second and third slides after this one, you can use this abstract or precise level. So we have to loosely couple those things. We can't mix them. You can say, okay, we do the precise one and do it one way from ISO to GeoDCAT. Or you can say we do the precise one and we go by second ways, bidirectional. So it's not coupled, those two decisions.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Caroline. I think we should wrap up because, sorry, that I think it is good discussion, but in the sake of our guest speakers, to give them sufficient time. So what is the conclusion, Jacob?
Yes, so we have discussed this in also with in collaboration with DG Envy and JRC, and we have come to the conclusion that we really do not want to block or make it harder in the future to do this two-way mapping. And therefore, the strategic decision was to take approach 2, the precise one here. And this has an impact on the issues that are postponed from the last webinar, mainly for the ambiguous mapping of DCT type, DCT subject conforms to, and the sub-properties. So based on this precise strategy and these issues that we are discussing since the beginning of the revision, here we are taking the sub-properties approach for the code lists that are identified in GeoDCAT-AP to be used based on the INSPIRE metadata. So here, those are the issues postponed from last time. We got no additional feedback on them in GitHub, and corresponding to this precise strategy, they will be resolved as creating sub-properties, which will allow us to easily come to a two-way mapping, possibly in the future. With the strategy 1, it would be much harder to do that. Not impossible, of course, but with some technical solutions that we would like to avoid if possible. Also, it will make consistent the view of the current state of the GeoDCAT-AP specification and the taken strategy, as Bert has mentioned. Now it seems that strategy 2 is implemented by GeoDCAT-AP, but in fact it is strategy 1, so it is a bit of a mix-up. So also with the motivation of the style guide we have mentioned before, the conclusion here is to create the sub-properties for DCT type, conforms to, and DCT subject. Now, also part of today's tutorial, today's webinar, there is one minor issue that is to be resolved, and that is a usage note on CRS support in GeoJSON, where we are currently missing any guidance. on this, saying that CRS support in GeoJSON is not present compared to WKT and GML. But since this issue is quite old, it seems that it is not necessary to repeat this information in every specification that allows usage of GeoJSON. Finally, we have resolved for today's webinar a set of DCAT-AP 3 alignment issues and a set of minor and editorial issues. So that's for the issues for today. And now let's give a word to our guest speakers. And the first one will be Leena Hallin-Pihlajamäki from Finland. So Leena, if you can take over the presentation.
Okay, hello. You can see me, so you want me to share from my own computer, right?
Yes, if you can.
Yes, I can. Okay, just checking. Can you see it in presentation mode?
No, it's just the regular mode.
Okay. It's not in presentation mode.
No.
Okay, that's funny. Okay, I'll put it in presentation mode first and then start sharing.
Okay.
Sorry for this inconvenience.
That's fine.
And now, do you have it or it's still
you,
connecting?
You are not sharing anything now.
It claims to me that I'm sharing, it's connecting. I'll put it on again. Yes, I sent the presentation to you this morning. Do you have
we can present from that if you
yes, like. Because it seems I cannot get. It's trying to connect and.
Yes, no problem. You'll just have to let me know when to switch the slides.
Yes, and, fine.
You have 10 minutes, please.
Yes. Okay. So let's get started from snowy Helsinki. We got 10 centimeters of snow this night. So next slide, please. We have a national metadata catalog for that we provide the data providers of INSPIRE and other data providers that maintain geospatial data and sets and services, and they are able to describe their assets there. It's based on the open source product GeoNetwork and is the official discovery service of INSPIRE for Finland. And the templates that we have are in 3 languages, Finnish, Swedish, English, and multilingual. And all of them are based on this ISO INSPIRE metadata profiles. And well, we have had this product in use for, I think, 14 years or so. Next slide, please. Around 100 organizations have it in use. And on that picture here, you can see the amount of metadata that the size of the square expresses how many metadata they have published, and around 1,800 metadata are published. Out of some are INSPIRE metadata, some are open data metadata. They are partly the same but partly different. Next slide, please. So how our system works today, we have our national metadata catalog, paikkatietohakemisto, and some of the information is harvested, or the INSPIRE metadata goes to the INSPIRE portal. Next, please. And we are also using it in our OSCRI products, for example, in the National Geo portal, where we have a metadata search where all the metadata can be used. We have also integrated it into our website, where you can see our products, for example, that background map raster product showing up. Next slide, please. Then coming to today's focus, we have a good cooperation with the Open Data portal of Finland. It's also based on open source CCAN and operated by an agency that we call DVV. And they have created an extension to the DCAT-AP recommended by the European data portal. Next slide, please. And so we have built a system where we provide virtual CSW interface based on an open data keyword. Next, please. And this is then further being filtered on the open data portal side to find out which licenses they apply. So they are not taking all, they are just showing those which apply those licenses. And they are doing the mapping, taking into account the GeoDCAT-AP, the earlier version. And it's going further on to the European data portal. Next slide, please. And so we started this cooperation by doing mapping in Excel, and by mapping for example, the categories of INSPIRE. And this we have then worked on, and so it's not a complete mapping. We have meetings with them once or twice a year to going through tickets. So it has been developed further, the mapping, through our cooperation. Please go ahead. Then if you click, and I would like to show you just how it works. Our present implementation system, we have this CSW virtual interface where only open data, metadata with open data keywords are included. And then there are about 700 of these. And that is then used by the Open Data Portal of Finland, where they have around 2,000 datasets described and over 700 data publishers. Just look at an example from the National Land Survey of Finland. This background map raster is in the open data profile. You can see the license there and the categories and links. And you can also, which is nice, go to the original metadata, because there you see it in Finnish. This is a multilingual metadata, so it's on the fly, it knows in which language to show it, and all the links. And as we've talked today, it's quite rich, this INSPIRE metadata, and even richer if you open then the XML. I checked that there are 1,300 lines, so in order to find the license which is used by the Open Data Portal, I just go for a quick search, and there you have it. So that is being reused. And I would also like to show you just quickly how it looks like if you open the RDF file of the Open Data Portal of Finland, and you can see how it's implemented with the DCAT dataset. You have reference to the location as a bounding box, and you have some distribution information. Well, the license is there, and also distribution elements have been, and yeah, and so on, and the agent and so on. So just a quick insight in that. Next, please. So links for you, just if you want to take a look further on this links to these examples, and they can compare in more detail. I'm not the, yeah, so let's go further here. So what is going on in the future? In the very near future, we have both these services. We have to give our data providers the opportunity to mark which data sets that fall into the Open Data Directive, which are so-called high-value data sets. And we have a draft solution in both services for this, so we are going to do the mapping here in the next few months. And we at National Land Survey of Finland are working with updating our GeoNetwork to the next version. And we have now a new, this new version doesn't support virtual CSWs, so instead we have a sub-portal solution made for the Open Data Portal. And on the Open Data Portal side, the present version is based on CCAN 2, and they are very much dependent then on how the open source product CCAN 3.0 is developing. And of course, they hope that there would be mature implementations of both DCAT-AP 3.0 and this profile that we are working on, so for them to be reused. And of course, all kind of transformation services and mapping examples are very useful for future cooperation between us. It works very well. So, and yes, some concluding remarks from my side. As has been said earlier today, that the ISO standard contains a broad range of information, and it's a de facto standard for describing geospatial data and services. And a lot of assets have been described, and the system in Finland is complex, and we have links, and we are harvesting. But the direction at the moment is that Open Data Portal is harvesting from us and not the other way. So just to notice, as you know, that the implementation, possible changes take time and resources, and it's valuable to get standards implemented in software, and also to have enough time then for uptakes by the data providers. Thank you. That was all, I think.
Okay, thank you, Lena. There will be an opportunity to ask the guest speakers some questions at the end of this webinar. But for now, let's welcome our second guest speaker, Geraldine Nolf from Flanders. Geraldine, do you want to share your own slides, or should I present?
Yeah, I will, if it's possible.
Yep, sure. And feel free to ask questions to the guest speakers in the chat as well.
Yes. I should be doing it, all right, like this. Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, I brought you not only the Flemish part, but also the Belgian view in how GeoDCAT is used as a part of a lot more federated ecosystem of metadata and portals. So first of all, I bring you that view. You see in the back the regional and federal levels. So we have the Flemish level, then the Brussels one, the Walloon region, and the federal metadata catalogs. All of them are already harvesting the ISO INSPIRE standards through CSW harvesting, except for the Walloon region. Those two are separated still, but all the others have all in one. And they have also already a lot of DCAT feeds, as you see. Then everybody has one or more portals specific for the geo world, like in Flanders, Geopunt, or Walloon region, or Geopunt.be. We have specific open portals, like in the Walloon region, and there are also portals that combine already, like the data store in Brussels and our Flemish node. The data store has open and geo in one portal, and we in Flemish region have open, geo, and closed or restricted data and services. Then everything filtered on open data, so everybody has their specific keywords to open up that domain to the Belgian open data portal that is on federal level as well. And he is scraping also over there some other portals that are not in the regional ones. And then all is passing by to the European node data.europe.be. On the other hand, we have then again from the regional and federal levels the filtering on the list of INSPIRE MNR keywords. So really for the INSPIRE reporting. There is no Belgian node. We provide the four of us directly to the INSPIRE Geo portal. And so this is how the structure in the ecosystem works. In the second slide here, I have the systems or technologies that are used. So there is a lot of geo network, as you can see, going on. There is also a lot of open data soft used in the different federal and regional portals. And now we can zoom in on the Flemish level. There we took the approach that the geospatial data and services still are using their flow with the geo ISO-based profiles and export it like that in our own geopunt and further on. For the open data, they were used to use the DCAT-AP variant. And so there we took the approach to have it all in one metadata management system, GeoNetwork. And therefore we created the DCAT-AP kind of XML way so that it is available for editors to describe their native DCAT variants, and they can export in DCAT-AP RDF to feed the open data portals at Flemish and further on Belgian and European levels. But of course, for everything that is and geospatial and open, we have to bridge that. And so we are not doing it twice, but using the GeoDCAT exports so that everything is also coming out of the niche. We use GeoNetwork 4.4. It is immediately implemented already. And then for the open world, we created a DCAT-AP plugin on top of the GeoNetwork 4.4. The URL is below, as you see. Now, how did we manage that? All starts with the Dublin core and has to be once only. So for the geospatial approach, we have ISO over there with an implementation profile. Then we have the INSPIRE Directive on top of that with technical guidelines. And we translated that for the Flemish level in our own best practices, so we can describe the data itself, geospatial services, as well as geospatial data sets and series. Now, the generic approach was coming over there through W3C with the DCAT-2 version, and there is an application profile as well. On top of that, we created on the Flemish level metadata DCAT. We did this to loosen it a bit up, as you see in a few minutes. with known the DCAT vocabularium and an application profile. We had already a long time DCAT-AP Flemish version, VL, to have all in place in Flemish region for the open world. And so the open data could be described. We started with DCAT 1. Then we upgraded to be compliant to DCAT 2. And now, since a lot of the geo data sets, of course, are open, more than 90% is open, we use mapping through GeoDCAT. And of course, over there too, we have our own Flemish version to be more precise in the things we need, GeoDCAT-AP PL 2.0. And so every open data set is in the generic approach as well available. Since DCAT 2 came along, we can describe the open services as well. And so again, the mapping is used for the geo world to have the open geo services over there. And then last but not least, while I said why we loosened up metadata DCAT a bit against DCAT, that is because we saw that we can describe also closed services and closed data as well. But for example, in endpoints in service descriptions should then not be available. So there we loosened up cardinality. Same for distribution in data sets, for example. There you have to be the correct person that can use the data, and you have to prove that. And if it's so, then you can reach also that data or that service. So there we are a bit less strict than DCAT and DCAT-AP itself. And of course, all the closed or restricted things of the geospatial world, services and dataset series are mapped then as well over there. All right, so those three application profiles, you can find them over here. We have the vocabularium and the three variants in the specific niche. So basic profile for the closed things or restricted things. Then the open profile specific for all that is not geo world and really open. And then the geo specific profile is only used as a mapping profile. So we are not using it natively. And this is then how the approach is to be seen if you look at each domain, the geospatial, vertical, the open, the services, the closed data and services. And then you see we have always first the standards. Was there already something European-wise or Belgian-wise we had to use? If not, we went through a standardization practice to make it for the whole community, that this would be the agreed standard to use. Then we have the metadata management system. So that's in our case, GeoNetwork. It has not, it doesn't have to be GeoNetwork, but it could be GeoNetwork as long as it is interoperable, it's okay. And then for the DCAT world, we made an own DCAT-AP 2.0 plugin on top of GeoNetwork. And we try to put it in a first view already in the core. But we have there a second sprint needed to be fully core ready, I think. And then in the end, instead of each thing has its own portal, we created the data vindplaats so that all is in one portal available, geo, open and closed things to reach the data itself. Now it looks a bit like this if you have the view, you saw already a lot in the presentation before on GeoNetwork. I had the view if you are logged in, you can create then with a new profile for a data set. You have the geo profile, the open data profile, and the others. So not open and not geo. Feature catalogs is only in the ISO INSPIRE world, Series 2, and then the services again have the three options available. And of course, we help the providers to describe the best possible way. So here I used a service template, and then you can see if you validate you have a lot of warnings. Green is okay, red is mandatory things, blue has just warnings as you can do a lot more, but it's not mandatory. It's just a warning. For the ISO and INSPIRE, we go over there and doing it with schema and schematrons. For the DCAT world, we have also standalone shackle validation that is also included in this GeoNetwork environment as well. So that if you have a standalone check and if you do it in the tool we have, that it's the same result that you get to validate on. And then I have the Flemish check so everybody can direct edit in our metadata Vlaanderen node, so they don't have to have an own system, they can use ours. If they have an own system and it's a Geo one, we can harvest them. So this or the yellow arrows. And then if they have DCAT systems already, they can give us the RDF export and we are harvesting them once a night. Everything is harvested. Now we have already almost 10,000 records from all those different domains. So then further on from metadata Vlaanderen, it's all in the data Vindplaats catalog. There is nothing over there that is not went to the metadata descriptions. Then you have the open flow. So everything filtered on open is in the same data Vindplaats catalog for Flemish level is dispatched to the Belgian portal and to the European one. All the links you will have available in the PowerPoint. We do the same for Geo. So everything filtered on in CSW is coming in the Geo.Vlaanders portal and filtered on INSPIRE to the INSPIRE European portal. And we have already a Google dataset search as well, and maybe others, because the endpoint is open. We don't know whom would be doing other filters, for example. And it is the work in progress exercise now to also export with the exact things that should be there to high value data sets, but also to the national access point, so the mobility data space and the health data space. So those three work in progress things are further work on the same basic layer metadata once only. We have a lot of communication and collaboration in Belgium to do all the federated ecosystem like it is. So that is an overview over here. Same for the Geo world as well as the open data world. And they are meeting and the collaboration is almost in one group, I think. We are progressing a lot on that. Instead of two separate worlds, it's becoming more like one communication and one world. And then the code repositories, I have to share with you as well. So everything is described on the GitHub. Here are the URLs. So metadata Vlaanderen, our fork of the core GeoNetwork 4.4 is to be reached on this URL. And then the DCAT plugin on the second one. And also our microservices fork is on the third one. So if you want to, you can reach that as well. And then, to be the last slide, one challenge I brought. The thing is, we don't have enough time to describe everything already on your GitHub pages. So you will see a lot more coming up until the next webinar. But the most challenging one that we want to reach out now to you all is the awareness and interoperability of the standards used in the other sectors, because if we all not will agree on the use of persistent and unique identifiers, it will be very difficult. And it has to be done on every level, as you saw in our ecosystem at the first place. But also if we go to national levels and federal and European levels, yeah, you always need to lead to the original source of the metadata, and you have to be able to avoid duplication, because we saw in the beginning one record in Flemish level was harvested, and it was again in the Belgian node, and it was harvested again, etc., etc. So then we had 7 of the same things because the uniqueness was not agreed on, or the harvesting was not clear in how to deal with that uniqueness and the persistent use of the unique identifiers. So that would be the most challenging part from our side, I think. Voilà, this is the whole team, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Caroline. Again, there is opportunity to ask Caroline a question in the chat. Now let's welcome our third guest speaker, Paloma Abad. Paloma, the floor is yours. Can you share your slides?
Yes, hello. One moment. I have 3 streams. It's very complicated to manage. Yes. Can you see the presentation, the slide?
You're not sharing it yet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for speaking in this meeting. I'm
Paloma, you are not sharing the presentation yet.
No?
No. You need to share it.
One moment.
Now it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry. Now?
Yes, it's good.
Okay. Pues I'm responsible for the Spanish SDIs cataloging, and I'm responsible for this monitoring and reporting INSPIRE. I would like to tell one of the difference I find with DCAT about the identifier. But first, I will tell briefly about the situation in Spain. The description of dataset and service in Spain is the same as in the rest of the SDIs and other countries. In theory, it's hierarchical and gathers all the resources of the organization that have data spatial. In this slide, you can see the most important national nodes in Spain, which now publish about 9,500 resources. And you can see the list of organizations and the INSPIRE teams for which the organizations are responsible. And here, there are 70 regional SDIs of Spain with published a special data through view and download service. The regional SDIs are very activity, and all of them collect resources at local level, and the total of there are 34,000 resources. Now in Spain, there are nearly 43,500 metadata, which comply with the INSPIRE metadata regulation, and all of them are classified with some of the INSPIRE Directive themes. In addition, we have another national catalog called Official INSPIRE Data and Service Catalog. This catalog collects mainly special datasets with national scope and are high-value datasets. Okay. Here you can see on the left slide the structure organization of the geographic catalogs, and the right side the structure of open data catalogs. What is the communication between the two words? This is the theory. For example, the national SDI with the national open data. But the today's situation is very different. That catalogs at national or regional level communicates with national or regional open data catalogs. This is its problem, For me, not. But when INSPIRE metadata is published in open data cataloging, metadata files are repeated, and INSPIRE metadata files appears for each cataloging in which it is published. Why does the metadata file appears duplicate? In my opinion, because the file identifier depends on the cataloging where it is published. For example, this is European Data Portal. If you find the metadata about the geographical names of Andalusia, you can see it 3 times. It depends on the cataloging. This problem also exists in the Spanish National Open Data Catalog. And for example, it is the same problem with the German metadata. You can find the same metadata 2 times. INSPIRE metadata is a profile of ISO 115, and in this standard, each metadata file has a unique identifier. This identifier is like a passport number. This passport number helps to metadata file to be unique and to be able to move from cataloging to cataloging. And for me, it's very important that in the CAT, you take into account the metadata element file identifier. Because the metadata file serves to many catalogs, for example, the thematic, the catalogs and other organizations, project catalogs, cross-border catalogs. Metadata, in my opinion, metadata file doesn't belong to a federator. This is the situation, the theoretical situation, but the reality is very different. The communication between catalogs is not hierarchical because there are many catalogs and many types. But the metadata in the final cataloging, there is only one metadata file. Well, I would like to finish with a few questions. What is the solution to make metadata files unique in a catalog final? The hierarchical federation of catalogs. The actual and featured structure of communication between catalogs is not hierarchical, and a single metadata file may originate from many catalogs. I'm sorry. The metadata element file identifier needs to be taken into account in the CAT as the unique file identifier, as no federation of catalogs can be established between organizations, because the metadata use the state data on a lot of catalogs. Thematic, cross-country, different projects, local, regional. Well, this is my conclusions. In the last slide, you can see the words of the catalogs in Spain, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Paloma. Thanks for the presentation. And now we open the floor for Q&A with our guest speakers. We have already some questions in the chat. There is a question from Bert to Lena about the mapping you showed from the INSPIRE themes to the data portal themes. Is that based on the EU data theme named authority list?
A small correction, it was the categories, ISO categories that we have tried to map to the open data categories. So a small specification from my side.
Yeah, and so are there any other mappings that you do? And is this a mapping from ISO to an European list or a Finnish list on the data portal? Because if there are any generic mappings that we can reuse or can lift to for the whole community, and maybe this is an indication here.
I'm not sure why I wasn't there around the table doing the original mapping, so I don't know if we used our own mapping due to not existing a ready-made mapping. So of course you're free to reuse it. There might be a more up-to-date or better mapping available somewhere. But I think these kind of mappings, if they could be reused and shares if they do exist, and I of course can provide this on GitHub if they are of use.
It would be nice to know. The reason why this is of interest is that our colleagues of the Publications Office as well have a collection of mappings that they publish, and if this aids or these kind of standardized, then we can lift this up as a part of the specification. We can have a managed mappings over there.
Yeah.
So.
Of course, this is just the one we have used, so I'm not claiming it's the right. Or I also heard from some Nordic colleagues that they are now planning to integrate the open data categories as a thesaurus in GeoNetwork, like for the data providers to optionally also directly tag the open data category, and that sounds, I think, also as a good idea to have that optional. So just a food for thought.
Yeah, but it's good. So that's the reason why we invite speakers to have additional food for thoughts.
Yeah.
But I see in the chat that indeed there's others that do this kind of mappings. So maybe it's good that we start sharing them, and then we can see if there's some commonality or some common action that can be taken.
Yes, I agree. Good idea.
Yeah, then I can see some questions in the chat already being resolved in the chat as well regarding the visibility of services and dataset series in the Finnish portal. So there was a question by Matthias. The answer, Lena, was that they are present in the open data portal already, right?
Yes, at least some, but yeah, some are there. So if you were, yeah, some are there. And regarding, I didn't answer that data series one because we haven't really done or some strict plans for the future. So we'll wait and see. It's also a resource question and a question on what will be implemented in the next C conversion and so on.
Okay, and then there is a question to Geraldine, if there are other parties supporting the creation of the DCAT-AP plugin for the GeoNetwork. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I said it in the chat as well. We have our own Flemish version at this point, and it can be used already, but it has some specifics maybe. And we did already a first sprint with a few people of the core and other member states in Europe that want to help to put a first version in the core, but we have another sprint to be fully generic, and that it is the version 2 that is in the core back again. And so there are interested parties indeed, but yeah, it has to be set up. It can be done by persons or by resources that we say, okay, we come together with a sprint of 3 days, maybe another one or a third. I don't know how many work is still left. François Prunaire, that is over here as well, I saw was working from the core on top of that, and on our offices and other parties as well. So that's just coming together and having that sprint and doing the things that need to be done, and then the core is fully compliant with the DCAT-2 version, so that everybody could start with that, and not only the Flemish one, but the generic one.
Okay, good. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat or any hands raised.
And we can maybe let's discuss on the identifier issue, because it was a challenge by Geraldine, and it's extensively elaborated by Paloma. So is there any feedback from the community additionally to it? Because we can share from DCAT-AP some experiences as well, but I would first give the floor to the community.
Well, Matthias has a hand raised.
Yeah, we have had this problem, and so looking into it from my perspective, the file identifier is the metadata record identifier, and therefore will be different identifiers when the metadata records are copied between systems. They will not be preserved. While the resource identifier, that the parts expressed inside of the identification info, is it citation section identifier, GMD identifier. I think that's a more suitable identifier to use for deduplication purposes, since I think it should be preserved. But I'm very interested in hearing if others have other perspectives on this. And that one should be copied into the DC terms identifier section in the DCAT dataset level, I think.
We use the DCT identifier, also RDMS identifier, and we had the machine readable and human readable original source as well, provided in a landing page with the property of a landing page pointing to the source metadata. To have with those four elements indeed a solution. And if we harvest, we check if they have already an identifier, and if it's the same, and if not, we have to check with blank notes, etc. So we have a whole fallback mechanism, to really check if it's the same one or another one. We can share it. I don't know if it's the best possible way already, but certainly we have to agree on that as well, I think, to do better if we can.
Add to the challenges that Paloma showed, so she showed a lot of the complex networking of harvesting network which exists within the ISO INSPIRE context, and then it creates these applications already within that network. You have the same if you're not careful in the DCAT network. You can do the same thing, namely you harvest as a portal and you change the identifiers and you share it up to the others and outside, and then the identifier, main identifier is changed in RDF sense, and then you get duplicates. So this is for all of us very careful to be taking that into account, that not only in the network with the same specification, but we have here two kinds of networks, and maybe there are going feedback loops from one to the other, even that we have somehow a good coordination in your network. This means that you're on your level as an advice. You have to do good identifier management, and as Matthias highlights, where do you change, how you incorporate things, and what are the changes that you make that good visible, and maybe have to add additional information. So if you go to DCAT-AP 3, there is a section on identifiers, and there you will find as well an assessment with all kinds of use cases and situations in the DCAT space, of course, not in the XML ISO space, but where these kind of similar challenges occur and where there's an advice formulated on how to deal with it. So to share more information and to maintain the identifiers that you receive as a harvester, and to share that upstream. So this is the balance on it. I will put that link as well in the chat. But so we have good advice, Paloma, on it, but the hardest work is actually that every node should implement, and that we should convince everyone to put effort into it. that is actually, the specifications are, I think everyone agrees on this at the level of the specification, at the level of quality and high level of metadata. Just as a note in terms of identifiers, and this is what you as well mentioned, Paloma, is that the identifiers in ISO INSPIRE are usually, if I'm not correct, UUIDs, where the context is not associated with it. So there's no full URI thing. So that means that this context is harder to find. You have to know which portal, which catalog you were querying to know which is the data and how to make the uniqueness. And that is in DCAT. Additionally, if you look in the RDF world with the URIs, you disambiguate on that level even. So you can go back to the original source if you make your URIs dereferenceable. So this is an additional aspect, sometimes used in DCAT exchange networks, sometimes not. So it's we don't do a check on that. That's what I wanted to share on that level, on the high level.
Okay, so the time is up. So just to recap the next steps, there will be one more webinar on the 14th of May, where we'll deal with the remaining issues, HVD and the XSLT transformation. I just remind you to have a look at the GitHub repository, at the issues. That is the primary place to discuss all that is happening around GeoDCAT-AP. Thank you for coming to the webinar today. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward for your feedback and to your feedback in GitHub, and seeing you at the next webinar in May. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. Have a great rest of the day, and see you next time.